In 1977, a train left the station that would take Brazilian music in a whole new direction. That train was called Maria Fumaça, and the conductors, a revolutionary band from Rio de Janeiro known as Banda Black Rio. Welcome to Black Brazil Today, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. At a time when Brazilian music was filled with the cool, elegant sounds of bossa nova and samba jazz, Banda Black Rio injected something entirely new: the fire of American funk, the grit of soul music, with the complexities of jazz, seamlessly fused with the unmistakable pulse of Brazil's samba and its wide range of rhythms. Inspired by American giants such as Earth, Wind & Fire and Kool and the Gang, Banda Black Rio wasn't simply imitating sounds from the US. They were adapting them, transforming them, rooting them deeply into Brazilian soil. Where American funk was hard-hitting and rhythmic, Banda Black Rio layered the funk with the lush, syncopated spirit of the Brazilian samba. Where jazz was complex and improvisational, BBR added the melodies of Brazilian popular music. The result? A sound that was 100% Brazilian, yet global at the same time. The 1970s were the era of the Bailes Black, massive dance parties that celebrated Black identity in Rio's suburbs. At these bailes, young Afro-Brazilians danced to imported soul, funk, and early experiments of disco. But Banda Black Rio brought something just a little bit different to the party. A live band. They played grooves that the DJs loved, but clearly grounded in Brazil's own musical traditions. Tracks like Maria Fumaça, Mr. Funky Samba, and Caminho da Roça became anthems, not just because they made you move, but because they sounded like a whole new thing. Let's break this down musically. From Brazilian samba, Banda Black Rio took the syncopated rhythms, the swing that makes Brazilian music hypnotize its listeners, the use of multi-layered percussion instruments such as the tamborim, cuíca, and the surdo. From American funk and soul, they took the tight, punchy horn sections, deep driving bass lines, and an emphasis on the groove. From American jazz, they borrowed sophisticated harmonies, instrumental solos that gave each musician a moment to shine, and the spirit of improvisation. Banda Black Rio managed to merge these worlds so smoothly that listening to their debut album, Maria Fumaça, feels like taking a ride through the entire Black Atlantic, from Africa to the US to Brazil, all in a single album. But Maria Fumaça wasn't just about music. It was a cultural statement. It was a symbolic album of a time when Black Brazilians were accepting their Blackness on a widespread level. It was a time when Brazil was still under a military dictatorship, and racism was very real, but rarely discussed publicly. Banda Black Rio proudly celebrated Blackness through their music, their style, and their very presence. They refused to ask for permission. They would show Brazil and the world the power of Afro-Brazilian identity. Between 1977 and 1980, the band released 3 powerful albums. Maria Fumaça from 1977 was their debut album and their most iconic work. In Brazil, the term Maria Fumaça is a popular nickname for steam locomotives. The term comes from the large clouds of fumaça, which means smoke, produced by these old trains when they made their way down the train tracks. The Maria Fumaça album was a watershed moment in Brazilian instrumental music, a trailblazing fusion of American funk and jazz, Brazilian samba, as well as baião and other Brazilian rhythms, with strong instrumental grooves and tight horn arrangements. This album symbolized the Black Rio movement, making instrumental music danceable, modern, and Afro-Brazilian in its essence. The debut album brought comparisons to well-known American bands such as Earth, Wind & Fire and Kool and the Gang. The 1980 album Gafieira Universal was a more polished follow-up featuring a blend of samba with jazz funk and touches of Brazilian popular music. The word gafieira in the title refers to the traditional Brazilian dance halls, but repackaged with a modern funk jazz aesthetic. This album would bring the gap or bridge the gap between popular dance music and high-level musicianship, pushing instrumental Brazilian funk to new heights. The 1980 album Saci Pererê is considered the band's most experimental album, slightly hinting at disco, fusion, and funk, while increasingly leaning on an electronic feel. The name of the album is taken from a mischievous Afro-Brazilian folkloric figure, with the album reflecting the playful yet complex direction the band was exploring as a new decade had begun. This was the band's last album before they went full steam into the sounds of disco. Along the way, the band would also lend its talents to other Brazilian musical acts. Banda Black Rio's musicians contributed to Brazilian soul man Tim Maia's recordings during his soul and funk period. Saxophonist Oberdan Magalhães and other members made significant contribution to Maia album's horns and rhythm arrangements. BBR also backed singer-musician Carlos da Fé, a key figure in the Black Rio soul scene. The band played on many of his albums, bringing their signature groove and horn arrangements. Banda Black Rio members also contributed to Brazilian popular music legend Caetano Veloso's 1977 album Bicho, leaving their mark on tracks such as Tu Naida 50 Kobo, which features Afrobeat and funk elements. The band's presence helped introduce funk and soul textures into the tropicalist and Brazilian popular music blend that Veloso was known for. Banda Black Rio members also participated in albums for acts such as Luis Melodia, Raul Seixas, Sandro de Sá, and Emilio Santiago. These connections showed that Banda Black Rio's influence could go beyond Black music circles and into the broader Brazilian popular music universe. Besides the band's own original compositions, the Brazilianness of the songs can be noted in their cover versions of songs by great Brazilian songwriters that include Ari Barroso, Zé Rodrigues, Gilberto Gil, and the teams of Luiz Gonzaga and Humberto Teixeira, Edu Lobo, Milton Nascimento and Ronaldo Bastos, Lincoln Olivetti and Ronaldo Barcelos, as well as Aldir Blanc and João Bosco. The influence of Banda Black Rio has rippled through decades of Brazilian music. If you're a fan of Brazilian music, you may hear Banda Black Rio's DNA in the 70s samba-rock of Jorge Ben, in the soul-infused MPB of Djavan, and in the modern sounds of Rio's pagode and funk scenes. Today, decades later, Brazil's hip-hop and R&B artists who blend samba, trap, soul, and funk owe a debt to the musical paths blazed by Banda Black Rio. Groups like Lineker, Eos Caramelos, artists like rapper Emicida, and even the recent neo-soul movements in Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro all build on a foundation that Maria Fumaça helped lay down. Sadly, the visionary behind Banda Black Rio, saxophonist Oberdan Magalhães, passed away in a tragic car accident in 1984. Without Oberdan's leadership, the group faded into silence, just as Brazil was beginning to transition out of the dictatorship and into democracy. Before their original run ended, Banda Black Rio even dabbled in disco, like so many funk bands worldwide, but they never lost that tight musicianship and Afro-Brazilian heartbeat. Decades later, Oberdan's son, William Magalhães, would revive Banda Black Rio, bringing their sound to a new generation with albums like Movimento and Supernova Samba Funk. Today, Banda Black Rio lives on, not just through their own music, but through the countless Brazilian artists they inspired to blend Black American music with the rhythms of Brazil. All three of Banda Black Rio's albums are pure fire, a sampler's dream, but the debut album, Maria Fumaça, remains a milestone in Brazilian music, a celebration of culture, a groove that keeps traveling generation after generation. Because as long as there's rhythm in Brazil, as long as there's soul in the streets, the spirit of Banda Black Rio will keep riding on that unstoppable train. For more deep dives into Black Brazilian history and culture, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to Black Brazil Today.